The way he had shit EQ, the way that it was programmed, the feeling of it was the most authentic.
What was he a fan of? What was his musical taste?
He loved everything. He was a master listener.
As I'm leaving the club, I'm hearing the vibration of the kick drum, and it was the most life-changing moment I ever had. Like, I had to get out the car.
This video is sponsored by Playlist Push, the music promotion service trusted by a community of over 25,000 artists. I've been making these videos for quite a while now, and if there's one artist that's come up the most in terms of other people talking about his process or mentioning how his work has affected them, by a long shot, J Dilla.
He was an engineer in school, so there's a lot of mathematical things going around in his mind at all times, but he didn't talk a lot. But he let me pick out some records, and there are so many records I had never heard before in my life. And not only did he let me pick the record, he let me pick the spot in the record and taught me how to sample the portion of the song. You know, very humble. You know, it wasn't, this is my lab. It was, hey, well, if you like this, you can probably do it.
Over the last few months, every time I've picked up someone talking about J Dilla and what made him special or about his creative process, I've saved that link, and this video is essentially going to be a testimony to those clips.
What did you learn when you first heard J Dilla and his music?
Well, when I first heard J Dilla, I was on tour. You know, we're driving off to the next city, and that night I was listening to it, and I was like, damn, this shit is crushing.
On this channel, one of the main things I like to explore is how artists who find original formats or methods or, you know, a voice that really breaks through, explore the background of where that came from and what made them and their practice special. So yeah, I'm going to take you through the clips along with a few little readings from this book, which is highly recommended, and actually a member of the community put me onto this book, and it's J Dilla Time by Dan Charnas.
If you cast your mind back, could you kind of just maybe pick out one memory, if you feel comfortable with it, one memory or story or something that you could share from that period that, you know, can let us into the creative process a little bit.
But before we jump into this video, a quick shout out to the sponsor this week and friend of the channel, and that's Playlist Push. Now, the biggest plug I can make for Playlist Push here is that since I did the first ad with them, artists from this community have got in touch, and I've been told that their campaigns are moving forward with some success. I said before that when Playlist Push first contacted me, to be honest, I was a bit skeptical because I've never posted my own music on Spotify before. But after talking with the team there, I could see that the reality was that they were properly engaged with what is a deep culture of playlist creators on Spotify, and they did actually also not only have proof of the success of the people that they work with, but also seem to deeply care about helping those artists find more listeners with their work. In short, the offering from Playlist Push is to connect your songs to its community of over 4,000 verified playlists, using the knowledge they've built up over 7+ years doing this to make sure your songs find the right curators that are going to pick it up and get it in the ears of more of the kinds of people who might then connect with it. Operating within this tough space and with a Trustpilot review of 4.3 stars, along with trust from a community of over 25,000 artists and labels, Playlist Push are offering a real service to people who want to use Spotify to get their music out to more listeners. For customers who need help with building or managing their campaign, the support team at Playlist Push are actively on hand with the knowledge to help you do your best with their product as possible. So yeah, if you're looking to get a hand reaching more listeners with your music on Spotify, consider going to check out what Playlist Push can offer you, and use that link below to get 15% off your first campaign. and also check out what Playlist Push can do for you for free. As always, a huge thanks to anyone who follows through and checks that out. Supporting the relationships with sponsors that I develop on Creative Minds is an awesome way to support the work that I do here. So yeah, thanks to anyone who does check that out. And yeah, peace. Let's get on with the video now.
Yeah, I remember one time I came in the studio and Dilla was laying down bass on a song, and I was like, yo, what the heck? Like, every time I come in, you playing something different. And I didn't know he played keyboards. And he was like, I don't. I don't play bass. I just know how to get out what I hear, you know, and that stuck with me, you know. I always felt like you had to be a super professional or just a maverick on things like Prince in order to actually play that instrument on a record. But he showed me that, nah, you just gotta be like a snake charmer and really be tenacious about what you're hearing in your mind, and you can get it out. Before he passed, he was actually replaying everything. Like, he would chop the whole record and then get the keyboards out, and he was an ill keyboard programmer. He was reprogramming those Junos, all of those keyboards to sound exactly like what he sampled. It was crazy.
In Dan Charnas' book, Time, he gives us a little bit of an insight into Dilla's upbringing and how he was a musician. He played in orchestras and also was the drummer at an early age for a jazz band.
You know, I'm a jazz piano player, and he hit me to so much music in the jazz world that I wasn't even aware of, you know what I'm saying? So that just shows you how expansive his mind is and how much studying he's done to become the great producer he was.
Speaking of how Dilla was soaked in music, Charnas writes, his 10-year-old body contained at least 50 years of codes, bass lines, riffs, melodies, and cadences. But as he got older, James began to program himself. These sounds were different from the music of James's parents. That difference came into stark relief for James in 1984 with 2 rap songs out of New York, Sucker MCs by Run DMC and Big Mouth by Houdini. These were not normal instruments he was hearing. The drums on these records didn't sound anything like the drum set he played in church. James didn't yet know that these sounds were made on machines, but in that moment he decided, however this music got made, that's the way he wanted to make music too.
Just having 1 million records and knowing where every record was and being able to tell you everything on that record. I watched him make beats in front of my eyes. He already had the beat in his mind, and I watched him relay it.
He explained to me once, you look for how many drums, what types of drums, maybe an unusual instrument that was used in a recording, and had the artist been heard before? Because you have, like I said, you have great people doing magnificent work. They just didn't get a chance to get that break.
And in terms, tell us about going digging with Dilla, because I heard...
Man, we went digging everywhere. I mean, we were digging in Brazil.
If you cast your mind back, could you kind of just maybe pick out one memory, if you feel comfortable with it, one memory or story or something that you could share from that period that, you know, can let us into the creative process?
We just connected on a music level. From there, we was just good friends. Musical cousins or whatever, you know. Me, him, and J-Rock would always hang out, even when he was sick. Like, I seen him, like, on the last days, you know what I mean? Digging for records and finding everything we wanted to find. He had to go out and sit in the car because he was too sick, and then he'd come back in and he'd find these records that we wanted. And then go back out, sit out for a while, and that's how deep he was in the music. He still had to.
Maybe it's cliche because it's said so often, but if you want to come up with an original way to work in a certain format or to use certain creative tools, then the first step for that is usually to master how other people are using it at the time. In this section, I'm going to look at some people talking about how Dilla worked with his MPC and just generally his method of sampling.
What was it specifically that you heard that he was doing at that time on that tape that was so revolutionary to you?
I mean, it was just the way he had shit EQ, the way that it was programmed, the feeling of it was the most authentic feeling. He was programming it, but it just felt live. The swing of it, you know, his time signature on that, the way that he had like the swing percentages on his beats and shit, like the way he just the way he had the music partitioned. He had bass where it needed to be, the kick was where it needed to be, the hi-hat was where it needed, the music, he was just clean.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But still had, he had an understanding of it that he could manipulate it any way that he wanted to. You know what I mean?
Roger Lynn created this MPC drum machine in a certain way. He made it possible to swing every track individually. So some could be straight, some could be swung and shifted, right? Meaning you could pull things a little earlier or push them a little later. That wasn't possible like that on the SP. Around 1998, you hear him playing with this function, but in a really exaggerated way.
Whereas this part is normal, it sounded like the kick drum was played by like a drunk 3-year-old. And I was like, are you allowed to do that? So it's like, and I was like, what the hell is that? So the next day in Atlanta, I'm asking him, like, yo, what was that drunken song that y'all were playing? Like, what was that? Like, and that to me was the most liberating moment. Like, oh, so all this pleasing my father, being perfect, I can now
Arthur Jafa, the very famous visual artist, he calls it misusing the equipment. Let's say one of his signatures is to make the snare come, 65 milliseconds too early before the backbeat. And that creates a long, short pattern between the kick and the snare, which clashes then in like small ways, like Princess in the Pea kind of ways with the hi-hat, which is straight. And then he's got these decelerated samples flying in. And then he's got some unquantized bass. And it's a mess. It's the worst shit. But it's exhilarating. But it represents an advance, I argue, for those who care about these things, music theory-wise.
James was quiet in part because he stuttered. His father was a stutterer too. But mostly James didn't talk because he was listening. Where others' energies went into their output, James used his own to process input. When the aunties arrived at grandmother Maybelline's house on Garland for family functions, they entered to the cheers and hollers, but while the adults carried on and the rest of the kids ran around outside, James drifted over toward the dining room and the wooden cabinet containing the stereo. He'd slide down on his knees on the plush red carpet and examine each record one by one. Then he'd walk to the staircase that led down to the basement. For Maybelline, her wall of album covers was decoration. James saw them as code and looked behind the mosaic to see the information that most intrigued him, the names of the musicians who played on each song and of the people who wrote them.
He was a stutterer. Speaking is risky sometimes, socially, for people who stammer or stutter. So he just cultivated listening. And Questlove, Amir, talks about when James would listen to records, often what he would find a sample would be at the very end of this long-ass 7-minute song, but it's brilliant. He just had the ability to listen into almost anything. And I think we're really primarily talking jazz for a lot of the harmonic material, but he listened to progressive rock. One of his most famous samples for Common is this Canterbury progressive rock scene. Hugh Hopper and Alan Gowan, right? Morning Order. And he listened to electronic music, and he listened to funk, and he listened to R&B. He had a record library like no other. That is one sensory memory I have of the basement, is walking through his record collection. It was formidable.
Oh my God. Like, how did he do that? What he managed to do was find every microscopic period of the song that had no talking on it or singing. On his MPC 3000, on 12 pads, he somehow, and this is before Pro Tools. Now in Pro Tools, you can cut and paste and stuff and manipulate how you want it to sound. This is before. I mean, this is done in like '99. He just, by hand, I watched him.
Yeah,
I mean, if you really break down how it's the equivalent. The shortest version is it's the equivalent of someone solving a 10,000 piece puzzle in record time. Like, this sounds normal to you, and that's the thing. Like, he made it sound fluid. He made it sound like it was an actual loop.
He just made everything look so incredibly easy and simple, you know? And it wasn't until he passed that I talked to Quest, and he told me how prepared Dilla was always, you know? So he made it look easy because he was just super prepared, and he liked to perform for you. So it was like, you thought he was, you know, boom, just what am I gonna do? But it was all thought out, you know, what records, he was doing things in his mind almost like Mozart would do.
How'd you do that one thing on that thing? How'd you do it? Like, you know, one of those producers that, it's a mark of a true master of production when another producer can't figure out how he did it. Like, wait, I know the record. I know how, even if I didn't know the record, I know how the record would have probably been, but how did you make the snare? And it's like stuff that you couldn't imagine doing, you know, with the equipment that you have or what. Like, you know, I figure I know a lot. I got a lot of different tricks. So for him to confound me and I gotta ask him, you know, you get the prize, you get the crown.
He's a great person, you know what I mean? A great guy to be around and so influential. He's the only producer I know that literally changed the way cats play their instruments. You know, Dilla changed the way I play the piano. He changed the way drummers play their beats. You know what I mean? People are trying to copy him, not the other way around. You know, a lot of producers, especially hip hop producers, try to copy, you know, the way certain musicians play or whatever, but Dilla had a way of, he had his own sound.
Dilla would hallucinate often because he was, I don't know if it was morphine or whatever his painkiller was, but he would be talking to someone, but no one was there. And his mom would sit and listen to him talk, and she'd ask him later, "Who were you talking to?" He said, "Oh, dirty bastard." And ODB had passed maybe a couple of years earlier. She said, "Well, what were y'all saying?" He was telling me which bus to get on when I cross over. Said, "Don't get on the red bus, get on the white bus. Because the red bus, it looked fun, but that's not the one. Get on the white bus." And this is what Dilla told his mother, and she told me that. And when we were in the studio that night that we heard about his death, his passing, we paid homage to him, resting in beats by writing that song, Telephone.
Okay, thanks for watching that one, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks to all the supporters who support this work. Thanks to Playlist Push again for being a part of it, and that link's below if you do want to check it out. And yeah, I've put another video on the screen here that actually looks at J Dilla from a slightly different angle if you're interested. And with all that said, peace, good luck in your work till next time, and yeah, see you soon.